the 9th of May 2026. Baseball loses a legend. 84-year-old Hall of Fame manager Bobby Cox passes away at his home in Marietta, Georgia. Just 3 days after the death of former Braves owner Ted Turner, 2 Giants, gone within 1 week. Bobby Cox wasn't just a manager. He was the architect of the greatest dynasty in modern baseball history. 14 straight division titles, 5 National League pennants, 1 World Series championship, and a record that will never be broken: 162 ejections. In the next 12 minutes, I will take you through his entire life, his playing days with the Yankees, his 2 marriages and 8 children, his $45 million net worth, his devastating stroke in 2019, and finally, the cause of his death on the 9th of May, 2026. This is the full story of Bobby Cox. Let me start with the question everyone is asking. What exactly killed Bobby Cox? The honest answer is that the family and the Atlanta Braves have not released an official cause of death. But we know his medical history, and it tells a sad story. In April 2019, just days after the Braves' home opener, Cox suffered a devastating stroke. It was severe. It left him paralyzed on his right side. It affected his speech. From that point on, he relied on a wheelchair. Then, in 2020, doctors diagnosed him with congestive heart failure. On top of that, he suffered from seizures and bleeding ulcers. His health declined steadily over the next 6 years. His final public appearance was in July 2024 at Truist Park, the Braves stadium. He was in a wheelchair. He looked frail, but he was still smiling. On the 9th of May 2026, he died peacefully at home. He was 84 years old, 12 days shy of his 85th birthday. The Braves released a statement that said, quote, "We are overcome with emotion on the passing of Bobby Cox, our treasured skipper. Bobby was the best manager to ever wear a Braves uniform." Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Bobby Cox was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2014. That alone puts him among the immortals. But his record speaks for itself. 2,504 regular season wins. That is the 4th most in MLB history, behind only Connie Mack, John McGraw, and Tony La Russa. He won 4 Manager of the Year awards, 1 in the American League with Toronto in 1985, and 3 in the National League with Atlanta in 1991, 2004, and 2005. But his greatest achievement, from 1991 to 2005, his Braves won 14 consecutive division titles. Let me say that again, 14 years in a row. That is an MLB record that may never be broken. During that stretch, they won 5 National League pennants, and in 1995, they finally won the World Series, the first major sports championship for the city of Atlanta. But here's what made Bobby Cox different. He did it while getting thrown out of more games than any manager in history. 162 ejections. That is an entire season's worth of games. Bobby Cox holds the all-time MLB record for getting thrown out by umpires. He was famous for it. He would storm out of the dugout, kick dirt on home plate, get right in the umpire's face, spit flying, veins popping in his neck. One reporter described it perfectly. Quote, "With dirt flying everywhere from Cox's kicking and with spit leaving his mouth, he was ejected from a record 162 games. But here is the irony. Outside the field, Bobby Cox was quiet, guarded, almost boring with the media. He gave short answers. He never criticized players publicly. After a bad game by Tom Glavine or Greg Maddux, Cox would simply shrug and say, 'He pitched well for me.' Behind closed doors, he was tough, but he believed in protecting his players, and that is why they loved him. Now, let me talk about his life off the field. Bobby Cox was married twice. His first marriage was to Mary Xavier in 1961. They had 5 children together: Bobby Jr., Connie, Debbie, Shelley, and Randy. That marriage ended in divorce in 1977. The next year, 1978, he married Pamela Boswell. They stayed together for 48 years, until his death. Pamela was by his side through the World Series wins, the Hall of Fame induction, and the long health battles after his stroke. Together, Bobby and Pamela had 3 daughters, Keisha, Kami, and Skylar. That means Bobby Cox had 8 children total, plus multiple grandchildren. The Braves statement mentioned his family first. Quote, "His love of baseball was exceeded only by his love for his family." But there is one uncomfortable chapter in his personal life. In 1995, Pamela called the police after a domestic dispute. Bobby faced allegations, but Pamela later retracted her statement. The charges were dropped. It is the only dark mark on an otherwise respected legacy. Now, let me talk about his wealth. At the time of his death, Bobby Cox had an estimated net worth of $45 million. Where did the money come from? 29 seasons as an MLB manager, a brief playing career with the New York Yankees, endorsements and speaking appearances, real estate investments in Georgia and California, and business ventures, including horse racing and restaurant ownership. But Bobby Cox did not live like a stereotypical millionaire. His daily routine was surprisingly simple. For a night game starting at 7:30 p.m., he would arrive at the ballpark at noon. Fully dressed in uniform, spikes to cap, he would sit in a small room near the dugout. They called it the weather room. He would put his feet up, light a cigar, and watch weather maps and NASCAR races for hours. That was his happy place. Cigars, NASCAR, and baseball. Speaking of NASCAR, he was obsessed with Dale Earnhardt. He owned racehorses too, but the cigars? He was never without one. Now, let me go back to his playing days. Before Bobby Cox became a legendary manager, he was a player. A brief one, but a player nonetheless. He was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1941, but he grew up in California's San Joaquin Valley. He played at Selma High School and Reedley Junior College. In 1959, at just 18 years old, he signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers for $40,000. A lot of money back then. He bounced around the minors for years. Then, in 1968, he made his MLB debut with the New York Yankees. He played 2 seasons in the Bronx, 220 games total. He batted just .225, 9 home runs, 58 runs batted in. But here is the cool part. He shared a field with Mickey Mantle, the Mick himself. Chronic knee injuries forced Cox to retire as a player in 1970. He was only 29 years old, but his baseball career was just getting started. He immediately became a manager in the Yankees minor league system. By 1977, he was the first base coach for the big league club, and he won a World Series ring as a coach. Next, he got his first shot as a manager. In 1978, at just 37 years old, Bobby Cox became the manager of the Atlanta Braves. He was one of the youngest managers in baseball, but his first stint did not go well. From 1978 to 1981, his Braves won only 266 games and lost 323, a losing record. In 1981, owner Ted Turner fired him. Turner later called that decision, quote, "the worst decision of my professional life." Cox landed on his feet. He became manager of the Toronto Blue Jays in 1982, and in Toronto, he built a winner. In 1983, he led the franchise to its first winning record ever. In 1985, he won the American League East Championship, the Blue Jays' first playoff berth, and he won Manager of the Year. Then Ted Turner came calling again. He admitted his mistake. He wanted Cox back, but this time, not as manager, as general manager. Cox returned to Atlanta in 1986 as GM. He worked with Hall of Famer Hank Aaron. Together, they built the team that would dominate the 1990s. And in 1990, Turner convinced Cox to return to the dugout. That is when the dynasty began. What Bobby Cox did from 1991 to 2005 is unmatched in baseball history. 14 consecutive division titles. Think about that. Every single year for 14 years, his Braves won the National League West, then the East. In 1991, they went from worst to first. Last place the year before, pennant winners the next. They lost the World Series to Minnesota in 7 games. Heartbreaking. In 1992, they won another pennant, lost the World Series to Toronto. Then came 1995. The year it all came together. The Braves beat the Cleveland Indians in 6 games. Bobby Cox was a world champion at last. The city of Atlanta celebrated its first major sports title. Cox held the trophy. He cried. We all cried with him. His pitching rotation was legendary. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, 3 Hall of Famers. And Cox managed them perfectly. He knew when to push, when to pull, when to trust. He never won another World Series after 1995, but he kept winning divisions. kept going to the playoffs, 16 postseason appearances total, more than any manager in history. He retired after the 2010 season. The Braves made the playoffs that year, a fitting end. After retirement, Bobby Cox stayed with the Braves as a special assistant and consultant. He was a fixture at spring training, a beloved presence. In 2014, he received baseball's highest honor, induction into the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. But then came April 2019. The Braves had just played their home opener. A few days later, Cox suffered a massive stroke. It changed everything. He lost mobility on his right side. His speech was affected. He needed a wheelchair. He fought hard through rehab, but in 2020, doctors diagnosed him with congestive heart failure. In July 2024, he made one final trip to Truist Park. Fans gave him a standing ovation. He waved from his wheelchair. It was his goodbye. Over the next 2 years, his health declined further. He rarely left his home in Marietta. On the 9th of May 2026, he passed away. The baseball world mourned, and 3 days earlier, Ted Turner had died. 2 Braves legends, gone in 1 week. Now let me share some behind-the-scenes secrets that most fans don't know. First, the weather room. This was Cox's private sanctuary. Before every game, he would sit in a tiny room near the dugout. He wore his full uniform. He watched weather radar. He chain-smoked cigars. And he watched NASCAR. That was his preparation. Second, there is a famous story about Andruw Jones. The center fielder was struggling at the plate. Reporters asked Cox why he kept playing him. Cox gave a 7-word answer that became legendary. Quote, "He's got RBIs in his glove," meaning his defense was so valuable that it didn't matter if he didn't hit. Third, a secret trade that almost happened. One reporter who earned Cox's trust heard him reveal that the Braves once tried to trade for Barry Bonds. The deal fell apart at the last minute. The reporter later confirmed it in a book. That was the key to interviewing Bobby Cox. He had to trust you. If he did, he would tell you everything. If he didn't, you got cliches. Most reporters never earned that trust. But those who did got the real story. Bobby Cox was not a perfect man. He had a temper that set records. He made mistakes. He had personal struggles. But he was also a baseball genius. He built a dynasty that will never be forgotten. He won 2,504 games. He led his team to 14 straight division titles. He won a World Series for a city that desperately wanted one. And his players loved him. Because he never blamed them publicly. He took the heat. He got ejected. He kicked dirt. He protected his guys. That is his real legacy. Not the wins, not the ejections, but the loyalty. Greg Maddux once said, "Bobby Cox made every player feel like the most important person in the room." Tom Glavine said, "He trusted us, so we trusted him." John Smoltz said, "I would have run through a wall for that man." Bobby Cox died on the 9th of May 2026. He was 84 years old. He is survived by his wife Pamela, his 8 children, and his many grandchildren. And he is survived by every Braves fan who remembers 1995, who remembers the dynasty, who remembers the dirt-kicking, cigar-smoking, record-breaking legend from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Rest in peace, Bobby Cox. You earned your place in Cooperstown, and you earned your place in our hearts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this tribute, please like and subscribe. Share your favorite Bobby Cox memory in the comments below. See you in the next video.